I spent 30 years running from a monster that knew when I would die. Today, I finally caught him. He looked me in the eye and told me my own name. That book, as its title implies, is all about imaginary beings. Tales, legends, folklore. But one thing that no one knows is that I had originally intended this book to include one more being. A being that goes by its Latin name Quietus Est. It appeared and disappeared across many cultures, sometimes centuries apart. Very little is known of it, but what I found was indeed astonishing. First, this being is physically no different than an ordinary human. You may say it is human in many ways. As I studied this entity, I became more and more agitated. I could not stop. Like a madman, I was trying to learn more and more, but very soon the excitement turned into another feeling. Fear. Bookshelves. Fear of what? Senor Borges? Borges' eyesight shifted from the corner of the room straight on me, as if he could perfectly see me. Fear of what I had uncovered. That Quietus Est is not a myth at all. He attempted to take another sip, but his hands started shaking, so he had to put the cup down, spilling some of it on the saucer and around the table. "Pardon me, young man. I am trying to maintain composure. But you have not tried the coffee," he said, wiping his mouth and forehead with a knitted handkerchief. I raised the small cup and took a sip, disregarding the aromatic fumes of Colombian beans drifting down my internal gorges. "Pardon me, sir, but you are saying that the imaginary being called Quietus Est was not imaginary. Is that why you decided not to include him in your book of imaginary beings?" "Only in part. Fear came from the realization of what it would mean for mankind to know about its existence. You see, it's no secret that we are all well aware of our eventual demise. We all die. But imagine what would happen if we all stared right into the face of death every single day of our lives and knew the time that was left for us in this world. Death not as a vague concept portrayed by middle-aged artists, not as a folklore tale of a grim reaper, but as a real living entity that stalks you and walks around showing you a ticking clock counting down minutes and seconds, getting closer to you with every second, trying to grab your hand. Running from death is worse than death itself." He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. "But I shall talk no more. Allow me to give you my scribbles from years ago. These are unedited in their raw format, so please pardon the poor language. It's right there in the drawer. You will find a folder with a yellow piece of paper. Read it aloud, while my ripe old body attempts to catch a breath." I opened the drawer, as he instructed, and found a yellow piece of cursive handwritings carved in Spanish with some Latin phrases. The scribbles were short, less than a page long with marks and scratches, but most of this was very much decipherable. He must have written this himself half-blind, I thought. What caused him to do that and not dictate to his assistant? I unfolded the paper and began reading. "Quietus Est, it is said that one shall not know about its own ways and times of demise. The imminent passing is only felt by those that are either terminally ill, and even so, they don't possess the knowledge of when and where, or by death row inmates awaiting the exact day and time of their execution. Lack of such knowledge coerces us to exist." Sumerians believed in a certain deity. The word deity was scratched and replaced with demon of death embodied in human flesh and bones, which again was scratched and replaced with entity, whose sole role was to stalk its victims and inform them of how much time they have left to live. Per the ancient Book of Dead, which was discovered as a set of clay tablets, typically buried in corpses, only those that are luminous can see the deity, again crossed out twice, replaced with demon, then with entity. The luminous ones are thought to be either people with high spiritual powers or vice versa, the cursed ones, condemned by priests. The reference briefly reappears in some Egyptian manuscripts, but in later writings is replaced by Anubis or, in rare occurrences, by Horus. The writings again depict this unnamed being as an eternal human who never sleeps, but always wanders. What's strange is that neither Sumerians nor Egyptians ever gave the entity a discrete name. However, the latter rare findings during Dark Ages refer to him as Quietus Est. The only depiction of Quietus Est was that of an ordinary human standing next to a sun clock, which was used to measure the time that the Chosen One had left to live. From time to time, Quietus Est stalks the Chosen One and, when cornered, moves hands of the clock forward to shorten the lifetime. If the chosen one cannot escape, then his time eventually runs out. The very last reference was found in Enough, Mr. Navarro. You understand the idea. Now on to the main question. Why are you here? He drew closer, and a dull shadow from a lamp cut right through his elongated forehead. Quietus Est is an eternal wanderer who is always with us, the timekeeper who sits at the edge of the stage with a ticking watch on his wrist. The greatest gift given to mankind is its inability to see him. When I lost sight, I thought blindness was a blessing in disguise. But one does not require eyes to see the wanderer. What eyes cannot see, ears can hear and skin can feel. I hear him. I feel him. You are here, Mr. Navarro, because you and I are the luminous ones? Borges paused and asked me with a trembling voice. Mr. Navarro, you saw him too, didn't you? Cold shivers that have been accumulating in my lower back rushed up my spinal cord in millions of explosions. Nausea formed a massive ball of air in my throat, and for a moment I struggled to breathe. Desperately trying to cease the thumping inside, I pushed words out. I saw him today. How do you get used to the notion of being a passerby on this earth? Ordinary humans do not have to get used to that. We have that built-in protection layer, that safety cork in our brain membranes that separates the realization of being mortal from flooding down upon us. It allows us to breathe the air. It lets us exhibit this extraordinary, yet sacred carelessness. The mental block that denies the laws of life on a primitive emotional level even for the keenest scholars. The indecipherable tetragrammaton is shown to us in every step we take, in every cup of Colombian coffee we sip, in every word of wisdom that we collect from books. Every second we bypass the sinister tick-tock and hear the name of the God being whispered into our ears. And yet we, humans, turn around and whistle shame, shame, deceiving our own self-cognizance. And that, as Senor Borges called it, is the true blessing. Those who possess the name of the divine being are doomed. Knowledge is madness. Knowledge is inexistence. Knowledge of death is worse than death. Bookshelves we sat in his hotel room until early morning, the two luminous and doomed souls. Our casual exchange of words was amplified by the ticking of the clock. It was dawn when I noticed Borges nodding in his sleep. His left hand was still resting on the cane and his pupils were shuffling behind shut eyelids. Borges was dreaming, so must have I. As I was exiting the foyer of the hotel, I hid behind the column and looked around the street. It was empty. Bleak light of street lamps drew strange crossbeams on pavements. Early October leaves were gyring in closed circles like witches around the fire. I was looking around, hoping to not see him. He wasn't there, but he was. I felt his presence not very far from me. Muscat orchards, they resonate inside like echoes of a guitar string heard from a deep alcove, but nothing particular comes to mind. I am trying to shift focus from one object to another, but my nomad memory is lost in endless labyrinths. You took my memories away from me, didn't you? Wait, mortal. Wait 5 more minutes and you will know the answer I hear in my brain. He is talking to me now. I can see how the long uphill walk is wearing him out. But what are pain and tiredness when you're crossing the finish line? As Borges warned me, do not ever come close to him. Do not look him straight in the eyes. He will always be near. His watch will be ticking. If he attempts to catch on, run. But he will forever follow. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you. And I ran. And he wandered. I evaded. He followed. He came too close to me in my hotel room on the second day after my long night in Borges' quarters. The fool in me still thought that escaping from him would be as easy as moving into a new flat, or checking into a hotel. So I did just that. It was some shabby hotel minutes from my work where I decided to spend a few nights just to think things through. That evening, and I remember every minute of it, was my first face-to-face encounter with him. My room, B6, was on the basement level. As I stumbled through the dark hotel corridor, trying to find the key to my room, I felt his presence, but my ignorant foolishness dismissed all mental warnings and turned the keys. As the door hinge squeaked, I took my first step into the hotel room. A street-level window was casting 2 thick yellow streaks of light on the floor carpet. I smelled dust and spider webs. He was in my room. sitting on the edge of the bed with a rope in his hand. A thin white blanket was covering his head like a shroud around a statue. I stood in a stupor like a paralyzed insect. An avalanche of sweat gushed from every pore of my body. With hand twisted behind my back, I was feverishly trying to twist the doorknob. He got up from the bed with a groan. He took a step towards me, hand too sweaty to turn the knob. Open it. Open. He grabbed my wrist. Advertisements open. Run. The stretched corridor of the hotel basement flashed like random shots of a silent movie. Run. B5. B2. B1. Run. Staircase. Up. Exit. Run. Online movie streaming services. Your time is coming. Fernandez Augustine Navarro. A whisper crawled into my ears. Coming, coming, hissed the wind. I ran until my legs gave in. I fell down somewhere in the outskirts of the town, passing out in an alley amidst rubbish until sunup. My madness has begun. In the days following my first face-to-face encounter with Quietus Estate, I've moved out of my London flat. I had some savings, enough to tramp town to town, continent to continent, doing temp jobs here and there, sometimes sleeping on streets. He was right behind me. Even if I didn't see him for a month, I knew he would soon catch on. It would be only a matter of time for him to pop up somewhere on the opposite side of the street, in the next car over on the subway, or madly prying through shutters of windows in the house across. My attempts to speak to Borges were futile. How does the blind master live with this curse? I wondered. How does he manage to evade his sinister follower? I had questions, far more than I had anticipated. But Senor Borges was already on the other side of the globe. I wrote him letters. He never replied. I tried calling hotels where he stayed. Unavailable. The books that he wrote, I bought all of them in attempts to find hidden meanings. What if he had secret messages for me inside his writings? The Book of Sand, Dr. Brody's report bookshelves. I even searched his earlier writings, analyzed every word. Pointless. Futile. Until 1983, Shakespeare's Memory, his final book as it turned out to be. I was somewhere in Eastern Europe when I bought the book. Immediately I began my scrupulous study, letter by letter, page by page, analyzing every space and every punctuation sign. And that's when I found it. The answer. The answer was the story itself. The story that did not require much study or decryption. All I had to do was read it. I knew I had to come face to face with Quietus Estate like Borges did, but not before having to go through the life of an exile. That's what Borges had intended me to do. Such was his final and only message to me embodied within his last story. A story written for the public, but intended for my eyes only. The story was that the protagonist receives memories of Shakespeare. Memories that overwhelm him, overpowering his own. He forgets modern-day cars and engines, instead remembering faces and names from some distant past, memories he has never known, memories that belong to another man. In a way, he will be like a shadow of you, Borges told me that night. Slowly but surely, my shadow was becoming me. That's why I can only vaguely remember you, my childhood home. Him or me, no more running. It ends here. Few more minutes, I say to myself as I look at the watch. There he is. He is out of breath, beaten, tired and bent by the weight of his own arid body. One last push, old man, and we will meet. I am hiding behind the rock. His footsteps on gravel and sand, I can tell them from any other footsteps in the world. His breathing, wheezing, and crackling. I am counting to 5. He knows where I am, but he is too tired to take that last step. Let me take that step for you. I am staring at his face, wrinkled like leaves of an ancient scroll. Time's up, Quietus Estate. I am telling him. He is not fighting back, and my Swiss blade finds a comfy spot below his Adam's apple. I am going to finish him now. Popping sounds are coming out from his flabby throat. What are you trying to tell me, old man? Let me hear your last words. I am easing the pressure to let him talk. But the sounds that come out, not words, but laughter. You are confused, he says. You've got it all wrong. Let me help you understand. I am letting him sit up. He is coughing blood. One wrong move and he's dead. He wipes the blood off his lips and nods in understanding. All my life I have followed you, he begins slowly. It's a miracle I have come this far and lived this long. Ever since I left Cordoba, I was a ticking time bomb. I was diagnosed as suicidal. Doctor after doctor, therapies, specialists, prescription, yoga. I have tried them all. Some helped for a while and the disease subsided, but then trolled back with a new, stronger wave. It's this disease that nests here. And he points to his head, forcing me to look for a way to end my own life. It all began in London, on that morning when I was sitting on the bench in the middle of that square, feeling the disease gnawing on my brain. My first attempt was in that hotel, room B6. I sat on the bed in that dark room for hours with a rope in my hand and a blanket over my head. Death opened the door and stood above me in the darkness of the room. Oh, how I wanted my pain to end. But it was not meant to be. Not then, not there. I had to live on. Ever since that day, it was a cat and a mouse game between us. I chased death, and death would always slip away. Until now. He pauses, rubbing his flabby neck, then points his finger down the valley and continues. I was born in that house. I remember every moment of my childhood. My parents, my toys, my school. I remember playing hide and seek with my cousins in Muscat Gardens and dosing off to Sunday clergy in that white chapel. I remember Eastern rugs being washed on the street and the smell of grapes. My name is Fernandez August Navarro. And you have no true name, but they call you Quietus Est, the one who wanders. Filaments of scorching infernos have been ignited all over me. The fire sets off inside my eyelids, spreading over to all facial pores and trickling down my body. Lies. Imbecile lies. I roar. Look at me, he says. I am an old man. And you? Still young and strong as you will always be. You have not aged. Now think more. What do you remember of your childhood? Shakespearean memories of random sounds and smells are all you have gained from me. Master Borges knew who you were. He cracked you and then he tricked you. He made you think you were me. That was his way of evading you by not revealing you the truth until his final breath, final book, final story. You are the one who wanders. And those memories you have, those are my memories. And now that I have told you who you really are, you must finally finish me. Bookshelves, I have heard enough of his fibs. I am throwing my knife away. I shall not require any blades to finish him. With hands clenched around his thin neck, I am strangling him. I hear him squeal as the grip tightens. I feel the crackling of neck bones between my thumbs. I see him gulping the air in warm convulsions. He looks peaceful. I sit on his chest and watch his last breath picked up by the wind, carried down the valley to the gardens, passing by the white chapel and the house where he grew up. The scorching wind of Andalusia is pouring sunlight onto his face, toying with eyelashes, pounding on cheeks and gyring through hair. He must have missed the smell of the valley and the ripening softness of muscat fluff glistening in the air. I am rewinding my wristwatch and walking downhill along the wavy trail, my thumbs still sore from killing. I am taking small steps sideways. Once I reach El Jardinito Road, I will hop on the first bus, and from there I will travel west or north. Destination will never matter. Anywhere is where the roads take me. Me, the one who wanders. In the summer of 1997, my family inherited my great-aunt's property in rural Vermont. The place was called the Salt Circle House by locals, a name whispered more than spoken. The house itself was unremarkable, a white clapboard farmhouse with a wraparound porch gone gray with neglect. It was the shed they warned us about. My great-aunt Alara had lived there alone for 50 years. She was found sitting perfectly upright in her rocking chair on the porch, stone dead with no discernible cause. The coroner wrote natural causes on the certificate, but the paramedic who first arrived told my father, off the record, that the inside of the house smelled powerfully of two things: baking bread and damp, briny sea air. We moved in during a July heatwave. The air was thick and still. The house was furnished like a museum, everything preserved in a layer of fine dust. My parents were thrilled with the project. I, at 17, was bored and resentful. My little sister, Mia, who was 8, was the only one who seemed uneasy from the start. "The lady in the garden doesn't blink," she said on our second day, pointing at the overgrown rose bushes. We laughed it off. The warnings were specific. Never open the shed after sunset. If you hear humming from inside, walk away. Keep a line of salt across your bedroom threshold at night. The shed was a small, windowless stone structure behind the house, its door secured by a heavy iron padlock that was crusted with what looked like white rust. My pragmatic father, a chemist, dismissed it as superstition. "Probably where she stored old pesticides," he said. The first incident was with the salt. My mother, trying to clean, found strange, fine-grained salt in unusual places. A thin line across the fireplace hearth, a circle on the floor of the pantry, a pile of it in the center of the dining table. She assumed it was from the old woman's eccentric housekeeping and swept it away. That night, we heard the humming. It came from the direction of the shed, a low, tuneless drone, like a single note from a cello played forever. It vibrated through the floorboards. My father grabbed a flashlight and went out to investigate, calling it a damn cricket. He came back 10 minutes later, pale and silent. "Lock's cold," was all he'd say. Colder than it should be. The next day, Mia developed a habit of staring at corners of rooms, her head tilted. When asked, she'd whisper, "The salty man is waiting." She began sleepwalking always towards the back door. One night I found her with her small hand pressed against the glass, staring out at the moonlit shed. Her breath fogged the pane, and with one finger, she was slowly drawing a spiral. The pressure in the house changed. The lovely smell of my mother's baking would inexplicably shift, mid-afternoon, into that same nauseating combination of yeast and ocean decay my father had been told about. Doors we'd left open were found shut. Doors we'd shut were found open a crack. The breaking point was the photographs. In every family picture we had unpacked and placed around the house, a faint, blurred figure began to appear in the background. It was never clear, always standing slightly behind one of us. A tall, thin smudge. In one picture of Mia blowing out birthday candles, the smudge had a hand resting on her shoulder. The hand was made of what looked like matte, gray salt. My father's scientific mind finally cracked. He researched. He found old town records referencing my great-aunt Alara. She wasn't just a recluse. In the 1940s, she had been quietly involved with a local group that studied folk remedies and coastal folklore. There was a single, chilling police report from 1951. Alara had called the sheriff, frantic, saying the debtor had come to collect. The deputy found nothing, but noted Alara had drawn a large, perfect circle of salt around the entire property line. "It's not a pesticide shed," my father said, his voice hollow that evening. The humming had started again, louder now, and the air inside the house grew thick and salty. My father's research became an obsession. He unearthed a truth buried in maritime logs and church diaries. Our stretch of Vermont, now landlocked for millennia, once sat on the edge of a vast, primordial salt marsh. The local folklore spoke not of ghosts, but of the brine folk, elemental beings tied to the ancient salt deposits. They were not evil, but ancient and transactional. They could grant boons, fertility for the land, health, protection. But their currency was memory and time. Great-Aunt Alara, young and desperate to save her family's failing farm during the Dust Bowl, had made a bargain. The records hinted at it. A sudden, miraculous yield from barren soil, coinciding with the sudden, inexplicable dementia of her then robust father. She had paid the debt with his memories, his essence. But the bargain was flawed. The brine folks' concept of a life was not a single payment. It was a subscription. The shed, he realized, wasn't a cell for them. It was a shrine, a conduit. The salt lines were seals. The humming was the sound of the conduit being active. Alara had spent a lifetime managing the debt, containing it with salt circles and ritual, paying in occasional stolen moments from her own long life. When she died, the contract defaulted. The creditor had arrived to collect the remaining balance from the bloodline. The phenomena escalated. The blurred figure in the photos became more defined. It was tall, skeletally thin, with a texture like compacted, damp salt. It never moved in the photos, but its position changed. In a picture taken Tuesday, it would be by the fireplace. On Wednesday, a new print from the same negative would show it had taken a step closer to whomever was in the frame. The smell of the sea was constant. A fine, sticky salt rime coated windowsills overnight. Mia stopped speaking entirely, just staring and occasionally drawing spirals in the salt dust that gathered on her desk. One morning, we found a perfect, child-sized handprint made of coarse salt on her bedroom window, facing the shed from the outside. My father decided we had to break the contract. The folklore suggested a reversal ritual, a reciprocal offering made at the conduit during a new moon, which was that very night. It required something of equal value to what was taken. Alara had paid with a human mind. We had to offer something of profound memory and life. The orchard, my mother whispered, crying. The small apple orchard behind the house was the only thing on the property that was lush and wildly, unnaturally fertile. It was Alara's original boon. The ritual demanded we return it. At midnight, under a moonless sky, my father and I, against every screaming instinct, chopped down every one of the 12 ancient apple trees, pouring a mixture of iron shavings and fresh water onto their stumps as my father recited the words of severance he'd pieced together from Alara's cryptic journals. The humming from the shed rose to a deafening, painful whine. The ground trembled. As the last tree fell, a sound like a great sigh washed over the property. Then silence. The oppressive salt air smell vanished, replaced by the normal scent of pine and soil. We rushed back inside. Mia was asleep in her bed, breathing normally. We thought we had won. We were wrong. We had only addressed Alara's original debt. We had not considered the interest. 2 nights later, I woke to Mia standing in my doorway. "He's pretty now," she said, her voice clear and calm for the first time in weeks. "He's not salty anymore. He looks like Grandpa." I followed her gaze down the hall. At the end, where the moonlight from a window fell, stood a man. He was no longer a figure of salt. He was sharp, detailed, and looked exactly like my mother's father, who had died years before I was born. He smiled a warm, familiar smile and beckoned to Mia with a fond, recognizable gesture. The horror wasn't in a monster. It was in the perfect, loving mimicry. The brine folk hadn't left. They'd simply learned to wear the memories they'd collected as a better lure. The debt wasn't paid. They had just upgraded their terms. The shed door, when I checked later, was no longer locked. It was slightly ajar, inviting us in to negotiate a new, more personal payment. The house was quiet, but the silence now was the most frightening sound of all. The quiet of something patient, something that had finally learned how to properly knock on the door.